Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Israel Matters. I'm Rabbi Pesach Wolicki, and with me, as always, is my dear friend, military, strategy, history, politics, and everything else expert, Elliot Chodoff. How are you, Elliot?
I'm good, thanks. How are you, Pesach?
I'm doing well. Thank God I'm doing well. Apologies for the layoff for the few weeks that we were not recording. I was dealing with a health issue. Don't worry. Thank God it's all completely resolved and everything is good. So, praise God for that. This coming week, obviously, if you've been watching the calendar, we are going to be starting the holiday of Hanukkah, the Festival of Lights, the 8-day holiday. It's going to begin this coming Thursday night. And just before we get into some big issues we have to talk about, just a quick thought about Hanukkah, that, what's interesting is that Hanukkah was actually somewhat of a civil war. There were actually Jews fighting on both sides. It was a very dark time. And one of the themes that we stress, and everyone knows about the candles that we light and the idea of the Festival of Lights and the war. But one of the ideas about the war that we stress and everything that we say on Hanukkah when we light the candles and in our what we add into the liturgy is that the Jews who won the war, the Maccabees, were very small in number, and that they overcame a force much greater than them. And this is a theme in Jewish history. It's a theme in Israeli history as well. That despite our small numbers, we're able to overcome much greater enemies, which of course speaks to the fact that, when you're with God, you're in the majority, even if your numbers aren't so great. I just wanted to point that out because we live in a time period that in a way thematically is very similar to what they were dealing with. Greek culture at the time was the new world. It was, if you were a progressive thinker thinking about, what the new culture was, and, you were thinking like a Greek.
You were a Hellenist.
You were a Hellenist and thinking like a Jew was like old world. And, if you wanted to be new and you wanted to be advanced and you wanted to be, with the times, the way to go was with Greek thinking. And we, as people of faith, people of biblical faith, we deal with this all the time where we feel that because the numbers are so great of those on the side of those who oppose us, that we sometimes can despair. But we have to remember that the battle of light over darkness is not about numbers. And in the end, the truth will win. And that's really what Hanukkah is about. And it's nice to eat, fried food and to light the candles and to remember the history. But in Judaism, our remembering of history is never really about the past. It's always about reliving something and making it current in our own day and age. That's what I wanted to share. Hanukkah is going to be an exciting time.
If I may add to that point, Pesach,
Sure,
something that we always repeat, it's no matter how dark the room is, one candle lights it.
That's right. And that's why light is the ultimate metaphor for this. And Hanukkah also comes at the darkest time of year, around the time of the winter solstice. So there's a lot about that, the idea that we're overwhelmed by darkness and we feel like we could lose hope. We could feel like darkness is winning, but that's just not the case. We are the light, and just like those Hanukkah candles go from one candle to two candles to three candles, the light just gradually increases until it fills the whole world. So happy Hanukkah to everyone, and please celebrate and reach out to us. A few people have sent in questions and comments. I'm going to share them with you, Elliot, afterwards. Maybe for next week we'll respond to some of those. But we have a lot to talk about, and you have an announcement. I noticed that on Facebook you're planning an Elliot Chodoff trip to Israel, a very interesting and exciting trip to Israel. Everyone's already, getting their passports out and getting ready after the vaccine, getting ready to travel again. So, Elliot, why don't you tell everyone more about this this trip?
At this point, I'm finalizing the details on the itinerary. I hope to have it all done by the end of the week, beginning of next week at the latest. Aiming for next October. I'll have precise dates, but mid-late October next year. Hopefully by then Corona will be something we talk about in the past tense.
Oh God.
But the idea, yeah, really is to do a tour based on geopolitics and strategy. My stuff. And for those who don't know, I'm a licensed guide, so I won't just be coming along as the teacher. I'll also be guiding it from beginning to end, or as we say, from airport to airport. It'll obviously have Jewish stop sites, Christian stop sites. Of course, for Jews who are interested, it'll be completely kosher, Shomer Shabbat. That's my requirement. But the idea basically is to put a bus together and do what I know how to do, which is let's deal with the history and the strategy of this country.
All right, so mark your calendars, October 2021. Okay, we have huge news, and it happened over a week ago, but we haven't been recording. We have to talk about it. And as far as I can see, Elliot, from the little bit that you and I have talked about this before we record right now, no one in the media is really getting the story straight about what this means and what happened here, and including people who are claiming that there was some sort of international law that was broken by killing him. So set us straight, tell us the story, and let's talk about the implications for Israel.
Okay, of course, you're talking about the taking out of General Fakhrizadeh, the Iranian director of the Iranian nuclear program. So I intentionally call him General Fakhrizadeh because here to sort of feed off what you led into. This whole condemnation in the media and J Street and all sorts of those associates that this was somehow a war crime, it was an illegal act. He was a general in the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. And that's really one of the more important elements of understanding I'm going to call it the significance as opposed to the importance. I'll come back to importance in a moment. That he wasn't a civilian. He wasn't a reservist. He was a general in the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps. So he was certainly a legitimate target for any country at war with Iran. Now, here, let's be honest, we have a bit of a quirk here because we are not technically at war with Iran because Iran doesn't recognize our existence.
Technical problem, yeah.
Okay, and they want to wipe us out. But if they recognized us as a state, we would be at war.
Right.
Fine point.
Meaning in the same way that when a soldier's killed on the battlefield,
exactly,
that doesn't constitute a war crime, but killing civilians does.
Right. And here, you know what? Now that you raise it, it's a bit of a tangent, but I think it's an important one. The term innocent civilians in warfare is the innocent is superfluous. Civilian means they are not meant to be targeted and killed. Now, they can be killed as a result of, I hate the term collateral damage, but that's the one that's used. But innocence and guilt has nothing to do with it. By the same token, let's flip it over. A military individual need not be guilty to be a legitimate target. By virtue of their status as military, they are a legitimate target in warfare. So he didn't have to be necessarily a bad guy. I mean, I never met him. Maybe he was, the life of the party. But the fact that he was a general in the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps means that he is a legitimate target for a country that is an enemy of Iran. And we are certainly in a military conflict with them, even if they don't recognize our existence. A second aspect of him being the general and the head of the Iranian nuclear program is, if the Iranian nuclear program is a civilian program, why is it being led by a general in the Iranian Revolutionary Guards?
Like an active general. He's, as
right.
you said, he's not a reservist.
Right, or retired or whatever,
no,
right? Okay. In other words, there was a clear military aspect to what's going on here. Now, is that sufficient evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. Let's not forget that in strategy and international relations, this is not an American court, a criminal court where a jury needs to be convinced beyond a reasonable doubt. This is not about innocence or guilt. This is about implied threat, explicit threat, a country that has called for Israel's destruction repeatedly and has a nuclear program that's led by a general of the Revolutionary Guards. So this is a purely military or security, if you will, kind of an operation to take out somebody of critical importance. Now, here also, I think what's key, I don't know how great a scientist he was, and it really doesn't matter all that much. He was a key individual, and here let me use the American analogy of World War II. The scientist running the American Manhattan Project, the atomic bomb, Oppenheimer, was not the greatest theoretical physicist in the world at the time. He wasn't the guy who did the first nuclear reaction, for example. That was Enrico Fermi at Chicago. He wasn't Einstein. What was his claim to fame? It was a combination of sufficient scientific knowledge. He wasn't a lightweight. I don't want anybody to misunderstand what I'm saying here. Along with a skill in organizing, developing. In other words, here there was science and practice that needed to be put together because the result wasn't some theory. The result wasn't some equation that was going to be worked out. The result was to put together a bomb that was going to explode when it was meant to explode. And that's a combination, like I said, of science, engineering, organization, management, etc. And that's who this guy was. And he was, I would say, an exception to one of my general principles, which is that the most important people to take out are usually the middle management, not the high rank. Because high-ranking people, first of all, with their exceptions, but for the most part are replaceable, especially in the military. In World War II, in the summer of 1944, Erwin Rommel, who was arguably one of Germany's best tacticians, was wounded in an American airstrike. It wasn't the end of Germany. He was replaced by another field marshal named von Kluge, who was an outstanding tactician. Was he as good? Not as good. He was excellent. But there are certain places, certain people who are key to a position. Soleimani, who was taken out a year ago, was a similar case. And here I would put Fakhrizadeh in that category. And I'll give you another example, and again, a German one. Werner von Braun, who headed the German rocket and missile project, the V1s and the V2s, who was also a major in the SS.
Mm-hmm. So it's very similar, a very good parallel.
Right, okay, not a general, but major in the SS. Who was a key individual to that project because, again, of a combination of theoretical knowledge, practical knowledge, engineering knowledge, organizational knowledge, etc., leadership, etc. So the importance in taking him out was absolutely critical. That's one. Two, the operation itself showed that Iran, Tehran, is extremely vulnerable. And that in and of itself has its own value. Whoever it was, and I have to tell you, I don't know any better than anybody else, but this operation had Made in Israel written all over it.
In what way? So what do you mean? Elaborate on that.
Okay, so let me start from the reverse. A few days later, a colonel in the Quds force of the Revolutionary Guards was taken out in eastern Syria by a drone strike, a missile fired by a drone. That had Made in the USA written all over it. Well, that's America's style. And I'm not taking anything away from it. It did the job. America has its own methods. It has its own technology. It has its own way of doing things. A team on the ground that goes in. Now, this guy, Fakhrizadeh, was in a bulletproof car with two other bulletproof cars, one in front and one in back with his bodyguards. They knew where he was going to be. They knew when he was going to be there. They set up the ambush. It involved a van with explosives to take out one of the guards' cars. A team, the Iranians are talking about a 12-man team on the ground, bringing the cars under fire. But ultimately what made in Israel is that somebody walked up to the car, pulled him out, and shot him and killed him on the ground. And that said two things. One is they wanted to make sure they got him, and they wanted to make sure they got him. Okay, this wasn't going to be one of those, we're going to spray, hope for the best, and maybe it works and maybe it doesn't. And I'll tell you, with all due respect to the Soleimani takeout, which worked brilliantly, there have been plenty of attacks of that type where the guest of honor walked away from it, including Saddam Hussein in the first week of the war against him in 2003. And we've had it happen. We had it happen in Gaza. We've learned that lesson. Missile strikes, drone strikes, that sort of thing are mostly effective, but in the end, it doesn't take much. Nothing works as absolutely as having the guy on the ground and making sure he's dead.
So when we talk about the implications of an event like this, so you were just saying that generally people near the top are more easily replaceable, but there are exceptions. Here's a guy who was really the CEO. He was the manager.
Correct.
He was running this project. Besides being a scientist, he was also running the nuclear program, and there was a lot.
And he's been doing it for years.
Yeah, there's a lot invested in him. From what I've been reading, he's been, since the beginning of their nuclear program, he's been a key figure in it.
Correct.
And so does this mean, and you said the same thing about Soleimani, that he was a very important figure. Is the Iranian leadership kind of top heavy in that there are key people who aren't so replaceable because they don't have the talent in the next level down, or is it, or are they well stocked enough that it's just a matter of time before they're up and running again with someone else?
Okay, look, let's be clear. Everything is only a matter of time. All you do in any of these things until you actually defeat your adversary is gain time. But let's understand the difference between time in the Iranian context and time in a Western context. And here again, there are exceptions. I'm being very general about this. In the Western systemic context, there are, and I'm talking about public, not private. The general rule is that people serve in a position for a number of years, and then they either move up, move out, or get thrown out. Move over, so to speak. It's certainly true in the military. Military is classic. You're in a position for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. As a matter of fact, it's one of the things we joke about officers. Just as they're getting really good at the job, they get promoted and sent somewhere else.
Yeah, it's a topic for another time, but it could be that Israel promotes too quickly.
Fair enough. But that's still the standard. Okay, when you get to the very, very top, and I'm talking about, let's say in the U.S., 4-star rank. So you move across rather than up or down, but it's still across. The commander of Central Command or whatever, 4-star general, doesn't stay in the job for more than a few years. And there are all sorts of reasons for it, good reasons, bad reasons, but reasons. You don't have the equivalent of a Soleimani who was the head of the Quds force for over 20 years. Now, part of that has to do with the nature of the West. Part of it has to do with, if you're in a position like that long enough, you develop, there's a corruption that's built in. And we may have talked about this when we talked about Soleimani, but I'll give you the American example of that, and I'm not equating, I'm talking about structurally,
Right.
was J. Edgar Hoover, who ran the FBI for decades and gained enormous power because of it.
Mm.
And of course, once he was done, now, again, the FBI has turned into a bureaucracy like the others. And I'm not saying that as something detrimental. It means that the head of the FBI no longer develops this kind of semi-aristocratic fiefdom
Right.
that Hoover had. Now, these guys do that. It's the nature of a dictatorship. It's a nature of a system where loyalty to the leadership matters. There is no turnover. I don't know if you've seen, there's some rumors that Khamenei has died. I haven't seen any.
Yeah, I heard that rumor today, but I also heard that it's unsubstantiated. So I guess we will throw that into our
Okay,
topics today.
Right, but
the supreme leader in Iran, there are rumors flying around today
right.
that he died. But he does have cancer, and we've known that for a while.
Right.
So
and he's not a young man.
right,
But
I mean,
whether he died today or not, okay, Khamenei is the second supreme leader of Iran since the revolution. In other words, between 1979 and 2020, there have only been two leaders in Iran, Khomeini and Khamenei. And if you think about how many generations of presidents America has gone through, Khomeini took power under Carter.
wow.
Okay.
Right.
In other words, how far America is from where it was in 1979 and how close Iran is to where it was in 1979.
Okay. All right, Elliot. So let's just take a few minutes, as you know, before we wrap up, to talk about what are the implications of this for, you know, geopolitically, and maybe we could throw in the fact that this took place just after the U.S. elections, when there's still a lack of clarity about who's going to be taking over, and what is this all? You know, what is? Let's put it this way: if Joe Biden takes power, if that's what's going to happen, we're not sure yet, but if he does, he's not. There's no way to turn back the clock. He's not stepping back into the same Middle East.
No,
right?
He can try, but I think it'll buck.
Right, for sure. And
okay.
So let's put this event into that context now.
Okay. Before we do that, let me just another point I think that's important here, because one of the criticisms, particularly among the New York Times crowd et al., is that Israel did this in order to make it difficult for Biden to rejoin the JCPOA, the Iran deal. And I think that, you know, that's what it was all about. And I think that there's something operationally here that's really important to understand. An operation like this is not planned in a week. This is months upon months upon months of planning and getting it together and gathering the information and putting the operational plan together.
They have to track all of the movement,
everything,
and find the weak spot in the schedule, and then figure out the logistics.
And I will tell you, and I've said this in numerous lectures on related topics, getting in is tricky, but not that complicated. Pulling off the operation can be very, very tricky, but not that complicated. Getting everybody out afterwards is enormously complicated. And the fact that the Iranians are talking about there are 12 guys on the ground and they have absolutely no idea where they are, they're gone, means the extraction part of an operation like that is enormous. Now, that's not done in a week or two or three or four. The other thing is, and there's something very Hollywoody about this. There are two Hollywood type, I'll call it scenarios, of this kind of an operation. This was obviously had its Hollywood qualities to it. Okay. But the two Hollywood typical scenarios are the least likely in reality. Scenario one, I call it the Mission Impossible or A-Team scenario, is that you've got an hour-long show. They spend 40 or so minutes putting it all together. 40, 45 minutes, I'm subtracting commercials. And then in the last 10 minutes, the whole thing operates, boom, it's done. And it ends with George Papard lighting a cigar and saying, I love it when a plan comes together. Okay, one, it works. The second Hollywood scenario usually happens in a movie, usually in the first third of the movie, where the plan is coming together and something doesn't look right, something is going wrong, but they decide to go ahead with it anyway. It gets screwed up, and they spend the rest of the movie trying to undo the problem they created for themselves in the first place. The real pros walk away at that point. And my point here is, it could be that this was the first run, that it actually worked. But if I had to put money on it, this was the second, third, fourth, fifth run.
And there were various reasons the other times to not go through with it.
It's enough that a delivery truck pulls up and stops.
Sure.
People walk out of a house. A taxi cab pulls up alongside. All that stuff that you just can't control.
Right. And just to relate this back to your previous point about how people saying that the timing had to do with the American election, and you talked about how long it takes to plan. I think your point was, it's not just that it takes a long time to plan, but figuring out at the beginning of the planning when the right moment will be.
That's right.
That is not, you don't schedule things that way. That's not the way it works.
No.
It's gathering information and gathering the plan, and then it's kind of a wait and see game. And then on a moment's notice, it'll be okay. Today we're doing it.
Well, not only today we're doing it. Here we are, we're doing it. Everything's in place. We're at that last second, there's go, no go. Now we're going.
Right.
And if I had a bet, there were a number of last second no goes before the actual operation. Now, I'm not saying that with certainty, I don't know, but from my knowledge and experience, that's very, very common. And you don't want to be left hanging with 12 guys in Tehran because of a glitch. So this idea that it was planned and done in order to make Biden's life difficult, I don't buy it. If you want to argue that one of the factors in the decision making, and this could go back months, is to do it when we know that Trump is in office. Because as long as Trump is in office, we're not going to catch flack from the United States for doing it. Yes, that has some validity to it. But again, that's not about precise timing. That's all of these operations are built on 15 factors. I'm willing to bet that was one of the factors. Let's not put this off another year, because who knows what will be in another year.
Got it.
But there's this element of magic, especially when we're concerned. The Mossad knows they were planning to take him out at that particular moment, and it doesn't work that way.
Got it.
Now, what does it all mean? It has a few things. First of all, the value of taking him out is the value of taking him out. It's a setback for them. They have to scramble now. They've got to get somebody to replace him. Maybe multiple people to replace him, because some people are just.
And they're also looking over their shoulder, because
that's too right.
It just kind of shakes them up. Yeah.
Look, we took out whoever the we is, took out the number 2 in Al Qaeda in August, took out this guy now. They've got to be thinking, hey, our security isn't so secure. I don't know if you saw the reports that they moved Nasrallah to Iran because they think he's unsafe in Beirut. Well, if he's unsafe in Beirut, I don't know how safe he is in Iran either. They're scrambling, and scrambling is good. because it means that they're worrying more about staying alive than they are doing other things. And that's always a good thing. They're looking internally. What about our security? What went wrong? Lack of confidence. None of these are kind of the absolute, okay, this is the game ending move. But I always say that, and I know you'll appreciate this because you're a baseball guy. Babe Ruth hit 714 home runs, but everybody remembers one. Right?
Right.
Okay, where he points and he hits it. But you know what nobody thinks about? The pitcher. The guy who threw that pitch, and Babe Ruth smacked it out when he said he was going to. And this pitcher is now thinking, oh my goodness, I'm done.
That's my place in history, right?
Right? Okay. We look at this from the operation and from the execution, but how about the other side? What's going through their minds? Lack of confidence, organizational confidence, worrying, have we been penetrated? I guarantee you they're going to be round up some of the usual suspects, but some of the unusual suspects, because that's the nature of these kind of regimes. I don't think it's on the level of it, but for those who are familiar with the roundup of German officers after the July 20th attempt on Hitler's life in 1944, conspirators, non-conspirators, didn't matter. Anybody, it completely disrupted the German officer corps in the critical time, thank God, of July, August 1944. So it's not that extreme and it's not that under that much pressure, but you know what? Disrupting the enemy is always a good thing. And Napoleon, who knew something about this business, said sometimes you just do stuff to aggravate your enemy.
Okay, so just to wrap this up and tie a bow on it, because we're kind of out of time. There's always so much to talk about. After Soleimani was killed, there was all kinds of saber rattling where the Iranians said they were going to do this and they were going to do that,
Yes.
and of course, as we know, they did nothing.
Right.
And we got the same thing here. They started vowing all kinds of revenge, and my gut tells me that they have to posture like that, but that everything that you're describing about, how this makes them second guess themselves and how this puts them ill at ease, really, what we could probably expect is that they're kind of going to, keep a low profile for a little while as they kind of figure out where they are.
Look, first of all, I wouldn't put too much money on that, because remember, they can always use Hezbollah for terrorist attacks on a global level. But one thing to me that was significant, and it was pointed out in a couple of articles, is that they did not specify what they were going to do. In other words, they've learned a lesson. It's a Hezbollah lesson, and wrote an article on this a few months ago that was published.
Right, we talked about it, where
right.
Hezbollah said what they were going to do.
That's right. Now
they're
committed,
and then they had to do it. Right.
They're committed to doing it.
We talked
right?
about that.
Okay. So here, Iran learned they haven't said what they're going to do. Because to say what you're going to do is now committing yourself to it. And if you don't do it, you look even worse. And if you try and you fail, you look even worse than that. So they've talked about revenge and they're going to get even, but they've been very, very vague about that. That in and of itself is a sign of weakness and lack of confidence.
Oh, that's
and
a good
legitimate.
point. That's a good point. Meaning the lack. So let's just make this point clear. When they're not specific about what they're going to do in retaliation, in this cultural context, let's call it, that is a sign of weakness.
Yes.
Got it.
So that's where we are at the moment. All of this, of course, is in the Middle East. This would all change by the time we wake up tomorrow.
That's why we can do this every week, Elliot.
Exactly.
we never know in advance what we're going to be talking about.
That's right.
Okay.
But that looks like the picture at the moment.
All right. Wonderful, great. So it's great to be back, and thank you all for sticking with us. I know a number of people reached out, asked what was going on, and we are back. We're going to be back weekly, and please share this, tell everyone about it. I especially appreciate some comments I've received from people that that they've gone back and rewatched old episodes, and they're really finding it educational. So again, please share this with other people. Please spread the word about it, and put October 2021 on your schedule. Everyone's itching to travel. I know, we're all waiting till we can go out
I'll have
again.
details within a week.
Looking forward to it. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. And remember to keep praying for Israel and have a happy Hanukkah. Bye-bye.